I want you to meet one of the people that inspired me most in the gold mines. So welcome to Mr. Stephen Francis, who is without doubt the world's most successful sprint coach and the founder of MVP Track and Field Club in Jamaica. As you can see, Stephen Francis doesn't look like a sprinter, and he never sprinted himself actually. He educated himself in statistics at the University of Michigan in the US, and coming back to Jamaica, he founded MVP Track and Field Club. And the real interesting part of this story is that he didn't take and recruit the best athletes. He took in second, third and fourth level athletes and made them world class. So nobody heard of Asifa Powell, Shirley-Ann Fraser and Melanie Walker before he took them in. Today they're world champions, world record holders and Olympic champions. So Stephen Francis has made it his competitive advantage to identify and spot talent that everybody else overlook. There are typically two reasons why we overlook talent and potential. And the first reason is that we think that what we see is what we get. So if we have a sprinter here running 10.6 on the 100 meter and one here running 10.2, who would you choose? And the majority of people would take the 10.2 guy because he's the fastest. Stephen Francis would say, maybe, but not necessarily. When you have to spot real talent, you cannot just rely on looking at pure performance. You also have to understand the reasons for the performance to be able to say something about people's potential. So if the 10.2 guy did have the best coaches, the best training environments, the best conditions for developing, while the 10.6 guy basically trained on his own and not in a structured way at all, that paints a different picture of the potential. The lesson is, when you're going to spot talent, it's not only the performance that counts, it's also the story about the performance. So the second problem we typically face when we are going to spot talent is that we tend to overrate certificates and underrate character. So I still remember coming out to the training ground of MVP Track and Field Club at 5:30 in the morning, and I looked around and the first thing I thought was, where the hell is the running track? I mean, all I saw was a big grass field. There was not even a proper running track. I told my taxi driver, please wait for 10 minutes because I simply think you drove me to the wrong address. I'll figure this out. 10 minutes later I realized that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. We think that the super sprinters train in luxury fancy facilities, but they don't. They train on a diesel-scorched grass track and in a gym back from the Jane Fonda days with rusty weights. I'm asking Stephen Francis, why are you not building a proper running track? I mean, you are training the best athletes on earth. Why are you not building a track? Then he says something interesting. He says the biggest mistake you do in the US and Europe building performance environments is to build big luxury fancy facilities. Because the performance environment should not be designed for comfort but for hard work. So he uses the facilities as a test. You don't want to improve them, you want to keep them simple and Spartan. Because he thinks they give him the answer to the most important question. How much do we really want this? If you're driven by facilities and glamour, you will never go to MVP. If you really want to improve, he has the best development environment. It's a good test to see what are people really made of. They might have good certificates, but what is the character? That's the second lesson. So going around the gold mines, I stopped over in a few places to visit some of the world's leading scientists on this topic. I want you to meet one of them, Anders Ericsson, who is one of the world's leading experts on expertise and a professor at the Florida State University. He dedicated his life to study the secret behind great engineers, great athletes, great musicians, even great doctors. And Ericsson came to the same conclusions as many other great scientists, which says that practice is what makes you good. Actually, the researchers have agreed on a specific amount of training you need to achieve to become one of the leading experts in your field. So their conclusion is basically that nobody becomes an expert in his or her field with less than 10,000 hours of practice. This has been known as the 10,000 hour rule. 10,000 hours is 2 hours and 44 minutes every day for 10 years. So let me give you an example of this. Let's go to Brazil. Why do you think they become good playing football in Brazil? Because due to my calculation, a Brazilian boy playing in the streets every day could potentially reach the 10,000 hours playing football at the age of 13. A Danish or a British or an American boy practicing 3 times a week would reach the 10,000 hours in his late 20s. Why do you think they become good running in Ethiopia? There's no infrastructure, there's no cars, there's no buses, and there's no bikes. Kids run 10Ks to school, and sometimes 10Ks back again. And then the village is located 3,000 meters above sea level. So just by living up there, they produce more red blood cells, which naturally boost endurance. These guys train to become super athletes without knowing that's what they do. I want to give you an example. I met Haile Gebrselassie in Ethiopia, and Haile is probably one of the best athletes ever. For many years he had the world record on the marathon. And Haile Gebrselassie is not only world known because of his running performances, he's also world known because he has a very unique running style. He runs with a constantly crooked left arm. It looks like this, very entertaining. The reason why Haile runs with a constantly crooked left arm is because, and this is a true story, for many years that guy ran 10Ks to school and 10Ks back again with his school books under his left arm. One of the world's best athletes is still running around with his school books. He's just not carrying them anymore. So the point is that when we think and we are convinced that what we see is talent, what we might see is just somebody who consciously or unconsciously practiced 10,000 hours in an early age. If you spend a day studying the top Russian female tennis players and the top Korean female golfers, you will be amazed to see a very interesting pattern. Behind every single one of them, you will find hungry, pushing, and extremely supportive parents. If you took the parents away from the Russian tennis gold mine and the Korean golf gold mine, there would be no top athletes. And it makes sense. If you want to become really good, you have to start practicing a lot in an early age. But there is no kid choosing on their own to practice tennis 3 hours a day or golf 4 hours a day. To some extent, it has to come from the parents. These pushing parents tend to be criticized for being driven by their own unreleased, egoistic ambitions. I'm not so sure about that. The parents who often criticize them are the ones who tell their kids, just follow your hearts. But if you tell kids to follow their hearts, they will sit down and play the PlayStation for 12 hours. If you want to develop skill and top performance, it's important to understand that passion is not something that falls down from heaven. You don't get hit by the light someday and then you know what your passion is. Passion has to be developed and nurtured. Sometimes, and very often, it's the perseverance that builds the passion and not the other way around. And that's why these pushy parents are so important, because you need a good push to grow the passion that's so crucial for any talent in any field. Let me give you an example of that. So a few months ago, I visited a guy called Gisa, who is a music teacher in Helsinki. Originally, he came from Hungary. He came to Helsinki in the 70s, and he decided to build his own music school. So he basically took a lot of 205-year-old kids, and he trained them as a violinist. And today, interesting enough, 95% of those kids he started training in the 70s are professional musicians, and 5% are really good amateurs. Now Giza has institutionalized his thoughts, and the way he recruits new kids for his academy is very interesting, because he doesn't even look at the kids. He doesn't care about the kids. What he looks at is the parents. So he calls the parents in for a little discussion. He looks them deep in the eyes and then he says, "Are you willing to spend 1.5 hours a day for the next 5 years training violin with your kid?" If they can give him a convincing yes, he will take in their kids. But he actually thinks that the parents are a much better predictor for how well the kids can do than the kids themselves. There are certainly bad ways to push kids, but there are also good ways to push kids. And what I found in the gold mine, that a good push is often necessary to grow and motivate talent.